Good morning, and thanks to each one of you for attending today. And an especially warm welcome to Reguant, our first keynote speaker this morning, and to Juan Pablo Montero, our other keynote speaker, who will give the closing address. I would like to express my sincere appreciation for you both accepting to be with us today. Like last year, we have the pleasure of holding this 11th symposium in this beautiful building in the heart of the University of Barcelona and indeed in the heart of the city. In this 11th edition, we are going to work on and debate green investments for the energy transition. Mobilizing resources with a focus on sustainable finance is a key to meeting the challenges set for 2030 and 2050. As stated in the United Nations Environment Programme, green financing could be promoted through changes in regulatory frameworks, harmonizing public and private financial incentives, with a special emphasis on green or sustainable and sustainable-linked bonds. And of course, the crucial involvement of the private financial sector. The Spanish section of the United Nations Global Compact states that if 1% of financial assets were sustainable, all of the 2030 agenda goals would be met. In this vein, the European Union has taken major steps to build a sustainable finance ecosystem to provide tools for investors to identify new opportunities. The European Central Bank, I'm very sorry, excuse me. I switch off always my phone with this morning exception.
I thought it was a university.
I'm sorry. I was trying to say the European Central Bank has set the criteria to be applied by the banking system. At the same time, and the other topic we are going to see today, the report Science, Research and Innovation Performance of the European Union 2022, Building a Sustainable Future in Uncertain Times, provides insights into how R&D policies can help achieve Green Deal goals, building an inclusive, sustainable, competitive, and resilient Europe by promoting the essential role of research and innovation. And let's move to employment. Employment in the environmental sector has grown much faster than in the overall economy. Skills forecasts play a crucial role in facilitating and shaping change and transition. Green jobs are growing in the new energy sector and its linked activities. Germany, France, Italy, and Spain lead in job creation in this sector. A very positive development that the new model offers in terms of employment is the growing participation of women. A range of measures has been deployed to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, which require green investments. We are faced with profound change. Perhaps we could speak of a new world, different, I presume very different, from the one Tocqueville referred to when he was in America, and all of us, we know very well this important, really important contribution to understand the new world. But the challenge is not less. And history shows that there is no future without changes. In this context, this symposium is set up as a forum for discussion and analysis of the current challenges, with the aim of contributing new ideas and proposals. And now let's move on the tables. Table 1, chaired by Soledad Núñez, member of the Governing Council and the Executive Commission of the Spanish Central Bank, Banco de España, is focused on sustainable finance. The speakers approach the topic from several perspectives, via market, or policy, or institutional approach. Julien Xavier Dauban from the University of Geneva and CEPR, Nicolas Atem from the Paris School of Economics, Rocío Román Collado from the University of Sevilla, and Cristina Pizarro from the University of Basque Country and the Basque Center for Climate Change, BC3, are going to present their research. Table 2, chaired by Andreas Loscher from Ruhr University Bochum and research member of the Chair of Energy Sustainability and IEB, will debate green jobs and innovation. Firstly, François Cohen from Barcelona University, a member of the Chair of Energy Sustainability, and Aurélien Sausset from the London School of Economics will offer their papers on jobs and transitions. The two other contributions from this table are focused on innovation and technological change and are given by P. Andres from the London School of Economics and Sugandha Srivastava from Oxford University. And the last table analyzes new energy policies and regulation and is chaired by Esther Martínez-Ros from Carlos III University, Madrid. Daniel David Arderius from the Chair of Energy Sustainability and IEB, and Maria Gaia Soana from the University of Parma present in their contributions some proposals to streamline the energy system and policies. The other two papers focused on taxation will be presented by Nicola Comencioli from the University of Brescia and Jordi Teixidó from University of Barcelona. Some words, hello to me, to Juan Rosellón from CIDE of Mexico, the IW Berlin, a member of the chair, and nominated Maria Zambrano Professor from the University of Barcelona. He is joint author of the paper with David de Dios, but he cannot be with us today to present the paper, but we hope and we wish to see him with us in next year, in 2024. Our warmest regard, Juan, from all of us. I hope that the outstanding contributions presented today will open up a great debate. Thanks again to the chairs for your groundbreaking work. And now it's my pleasure to present Mar. From 2017, Mar Reguant has been a professor in the Department of Economics at Northwestern University. My research deals with the economics of energy with an emphasis on electricity and the pollution associated with electricity generation. Her brilliant academic career places her among the best young economists worldwide in the energy economics. She graduated in economics from the Universitat Autònoma of Barcelona, and in 2011 received her PhD from MIT with the dissertation Essays in Energy and Environmental Markets, the subject that has shaped her entire career. In this incredible short period of time, she has published significant contributions in numerous top journals, such as American Economic Review, Economic European Review, and several. Journal of the Association of Environmental and Resource Economics, Journal of Political Economy, among many others, as well as working papers, policy reports, and other works. She has received numerous honors and awards. Mar is member of the Board of Directors of the American Economic Journal, Associate Editor of the RAND Journal of Economics, referee of all the top journals such American Economic Review, Econometrica, RAND Journal of Economics, and the rest of the tops. And to this intensive activity, we should add her conferences and participation in academic institutions. We have before us an incredible talent. Mar, is a great honor to have you here with us today. Mar Reguant will present her research successes in the renewable expansion learning from Spain and Chile. Thank you, Mar, for accepting to be keynote speaker in this 11th symposium. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maite, for such a good introduction. So it's my pleasure to be here. As you might know, I am from, not from Barcelona, I have to say, but from Catalonia. So it's great to be here. I was telling them I just spent the night at my aunt's place, and from my aunt's place I could see the university. So it's great to be back home and to be here presenting my work. When they told me that the goal of the conference focused on green investments, I thought I was very glad to accept, because in my work, I work a lot on renewables and integration of renewable power. So I figured that's green investment. So I hope I can share with you my research and also give you some basic highlights on how I see the role for renewables in this energy transition, which is, of course, central and critical to its success. So let me see. Mighty, yeah.
Here?
I can kind of read it, but if you printed it, yes, it is very small.
We were here last year, and I know that.
I can
think
more or
it's
less
not
read it.
exactly
Yeah,
the number
no,
of the
that's good.
pages.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
Yesterday night, I cleaned that because I suppose that
Yeah.
probably could happen.
So as you know, there's been an immense revolution in the last 10 years when it comes to renewable power. We have seen the cost of wind power go down quite dramatically, but even more, the cost of solar power has plummeted like a factor of 10. So in 2010, solar power was expensive, quite expensive, I have to say. And in 2020, solar power is dirt cheap, basically. It's the cheapest technology available, if we abstract from the fact that we don't have sun at night, okay? But it is an extremely cheap technology, and it used to be very expensive. So we have this cost reduction. Part of it has been technological improvements, but a good part of it has been just learning by doing and learning how to do things better. In today's presentation, I will mostly present 2 research papers, but I think a theme that goes together with the research papers is that the revolution that we are seeing in the renewable sector is not just about cost reductions, it's about what you do with these technologies once they are cheap. And there are many complementary innovations that might not be on the technological side of the gadget per se, but on the technological side, the market side of what you do with this gadget, how do we integrate it here. So there are many examples of how markets are changing to incorporate renewables. And for example, in Europe, we see a trend towards more continuous trading, more frequent trading, so that we can adapt better to the changes, the volatility of, let's say, wind power, for example, in Germany. California has managed to include all of the Western interconnection into a balancing market so that they can balance renewables better. That's in some sense a form of innovation. You're bringing markets together to incorporate renewable power more successfully. Today I will talk about two successes that also required adaptation, required doing things better so that the cost of renewable power goes down, not only from a purely technological point of view, but also as we put it into the system. And one is Spain, where there are many things that have been done to allow for the integration of more renewables. I'll talk about a few. And the other one is Chile, where there has been massive investment, green investments into the grid, so that we can bring renewable power to Santiago and the big demand centers. So I'll be talking about this, and again, I think of them as innovations. So how do we put regulation, investment together so that we don't have these bottlenecks that might make the transition harder, more expensive, and importantly for the climate challenge slower. So anything that can speed up the transition is obviously very welcome and very needed, very much needed. So I'll talk first about my first paper, which is the one in Spain. And here, this is a very descriptive paper in which we describe how Spain has managed to integrate wind power into its grid. But I will, again, emphasize in a bit of a descriptive way how Spain has been redesigning its market to reduce the costs from renewable power integration. So what's the challenge with renewables? In this room, many of you already know, but they can be a bit volatile and a bit intermittent. So wind in particular is hard to forecast, even a few hours before it delivers. And it can also be a bit erratic, it's pretty random. When running a regression, this is great news because it's as good as a random variable that, you know, it's basically a bit all over the place. So it's great from a statistical point of view, but if you are a grid operator and you have to deal with that thing, it goes up and down and it's kind of harder to integrate into the grid. So in this project, we look at the experience from Spain, which already since the early 2010s has about 20% of wind generation. That's a very large number if we consider that Spain is, together with Portugal, an electric island. There are limits to how much it can send power to the rest of Europe, an issue that unfortunately during this energy crisis we have faced. Spain and Portugal oftentimes become isolated, and therefore when there is a lot of wind, the wind needs to be incorporated within the Spanish and the Portuguese grid, which, as many of you may know, belong to the Iberian electricity market. So the goal of this paper was to see what happens when we have this volatility, this intermittency. I plot them here. In the graph above, you can see how volatile wind is depending on how many hours are passed. And basically, in a matter of 6 hours, wind can already move about half a standard deviation to 1 standard deviation, but in a matter of 12 hours, it can move already, the median must be 1 standard deviation, and easily it can move 2 to 3 standard deviations. So wind changes a lot quite fast. In the graph below, you can see that wind is also hard to forecast. So here you can see the difference between delivered wind and forecasted wind a few hours before delivery. And there are still quite significant differences, obviously not a 1 standard deviation magnitude, but you can see it's about 0.1 to 0.2 standard deviations of a forecast error, even 1 to 2 to 5 hours before delivery. So there is some noise, and you need to kind of adapt to this new form of generation. So the paper that I put here, in case you're interested, is together with Claire Peterson, who's a student, and Lola Segura, who went on to consulting at Analysis. We explore the impact that wind power has had on several variables, but in our paper we focus on operational costs. So here I put the final price that consumers pay. This is an oversimplified version, but it's basically the energy price plus the operational costs. In the paper, we refer to operational costs as things like reliability costs, congestion costs, the costs for reserves, and other products that might ensure that the grid is operating safely. So in the paper, we ask, okay, how do these costs depend on the level of wind? Do they go up? Presumably yes, but the question is, do they go up by a lot? And what happens to final prices? Does the final prices still go up, or does wind still reduce prices, even if it increases operational costs? The paper is very simple. It's regression analysis of a long time series. It's an hourly time series for about 10 years. And some of the key findings that we have is that we do find that wind does increase operational costs. This should not be surprising. We do find, however, that the increases in operational costs are an order of magnitude smaller than the cost reductions that are coming from wind production. So in overall, the paper gives a positive kind of success story from the integration of wind power in the Spanish market. I'll talk in a moment about innovations and things that have been adapted in Spain to make it cheaper. So you can see here one of the main results of the paper, and it's basically showing you our estimate of how wind power increases operational costs. So it's very small in here, but on the x-axis you have the amount of power. At the very end is 10 gigawatts, which is a very sizable amount. And on the upper graph, you can see whether operational costs are higher with more wind. And you can see it trends up. It's basically showing that the low levels of wind operational costs are in the order of 2 to 3 euros per megawatt hour, and they can go up to 4 euros per megawatt hour. But you can see that this increase is relatively minor if you take into account that prices during this period were in the order of 40 euros per megawatt hour. So operational costs go up, but maybe they increase cost to consumers by 2%, 3%, but not more. You can also see a finding that we thought was interesting. The lower panel shows you the marginal impact of wind, and we see that operational costs go up, but it doesn't seem to go up exponentially. It is rather flat, and actually we see that the highest operational challenges are not in the moments of highest wind, in a cost per megawatt basis. One interpretation that we make about this is that when there is a lot of wind, obviously there are higher operational costs. This is what the upper panel is showing. So there are higher costs. But at the margin, you have more power plants available because they are not running. You have a lot of wind, so you have some more margin of adjustment, even though you end up obviously having to spend quite a bit of money making sure that everything is in balance. So to us, this was a bit surprising because we had expected the costs to go up as we did, but we had expected them to maybe go up exponentially. So it shows that you can incorporate quite a bit of wind, and maybe it's something you have to worry about, but it's not kind of impossible or exponentially compounding. So that's kind of a bit of a positive effect. I wanted to mention a bit, I was talking about innovation. How does innovation affect the cost of wind? How does innovation affect the cost of solar? So Spain has done a lot to reduce the cost of wind by innovating in its market. One example, for example, is that wind power used to be seen as a problem for frequency, and now they are allowed to participate in some products. So in some ways you try to start, okay, if the world gives you lemons, you try to make lemonade. That's kind of the spirit. They also have made several changes to their market design, and one that we emphasize in the paper is the change in how wind power was subsidized. So wind power used to be subsidized with a premium, then with a feed-in tariff, and eventually it moved to a system in 2014 where wind power was subsidized on a capacity basis, not on a production basis. So what this did is that wind power no longer was bidding very low prices. In Spain, it would be zero prices. In other markets, subsidized wind used to be at negative prices. So we had Texas or Germany where wind farms that were subsidized were bidding negative into the market. So this is kind of a way to reward green investments. You are giving them a subsidy and you are making them participate very aggressively. But when it comes to market operations, it can be a bit of a distortion because obviously wind power does not have negative costs. So what Spain did was change a little bit the system to avoid some of that. What we can see in the lower panel is that you can see the bluish one that's kind of close to zero. That's before the policy change. There were many hours in Spain where prices were zero. As I was mentioning, in other markets, these would be negative prices. So in Spain, you are not allowing prices to go below zero, but in Texas, easily they could go to minus 100, the same in Germany. So after the policy change, no longer we see these zero prices being hit quite often. And that, again, we find in the paper that reduced operational costs because it made the operation of the system smoother. Consumers were not necessarily better off because prices were higher after removing all these very aggressive zero pricing, but the outcome appears to be more efficient. You have less, in some ways, artificial congestion generated by all of this bidding. So this is, again, one positive success story. So I brought this up. Oh, I did put the timer. Okay, great. So I'm good on time. I thought I had not started my timer. So let me now, in the next 10 minutes, talk about another example, a success story of renewable power integration. I felt a bit self-conscious of presenting something about Chile, so I hope it's accurate. Yes. But yeah, probably the afternoon keynote speaker could also say some words about renewable expansion in Chile. So in this project, we try to look at Chile because it's such an inspirational success story in the integration of, in this case, solar power. So we wanted to examine how solar power has been integrated in Chile. And it's another big bottleneck that we see in renewable integration. Yes, the costs of wind and solar have gone down, but if you cannot build a grid to harvest wind and solar, it's not that useful. So it's part of its cost, and we need innovation in this area to make progress. Luckily, there have been great innovations in the grid. I don't think I have it in this slide, but for example, we have seen a lot of innovation in high voltage transmission that has reduced losses. We have seen a lot of innovation in direct current lines that can go underground or can go underwater. So there are many things that make transmission today easier than 10 years ago. But from a public policy point of view, from a political economy point of view, deploying these large lines and making sure that you can deliver power from the good spots to the demand centers, it's a very difficult task. In the United States, for example, we constantly see transmission projects being not being rolled out because there are conflicts between different states. But for renewable power, you need transmission lines to cross states. Here in Europe, it can be a bit contentious, even if countries agree with each other. There is a lot of opposition to building these lines, and Europe is very densely populated. So it's kind of a bit difficult to do these grid projects, even though they are essential. In the United States, for example, they are now actively changing regulations so that it's easier to build a transmission line. In some sense, in the US, you should not be surprised, but it's really easy to build a pipeline that will cross I don't know how many states, or it used to be very easy, but it's really hard to build a transmission line unless it's very much centrally done. So Chile did a public effort in the construction of a line. Chile did something that's very useful in the case of transmission line projects, which is that they paid it the consumers paid for the transmission line instead of the renewable projects. So in some ways, it's a bit of a subsidy to green investment because you're making the transmission ready for renewables to come in. The goal in Chile was to connect the mining region in the north, which is solar abundant, with Atacama, which is very solar abundant and very easy to place, and then finally with Santiago. And they did two major expansions in 2017 and 2018. So the goal of this paper that I have with Luis Gonzalez and Koichiro Ito is to look at this experience and think of it as a bit of a case study. What can we learn from Chile? So we basically do a cost-benefit analysis of these transmission projects, and we ask who are the winners, who are the losers. To do that, we do first some regression analysis to see how the transmission grid, similar to the previous paper, how the transmission grid is performing before and after these expansions. But then we also built a mathematical model of the Chilean electricity market so that we can run some simulations on what would happen with the grid or without the grid. So we highlight that the grid was essential, critical to allow for this renewable expansion, and that the cost benefit for Chile was quite a no-brainer. So the line was very cost effective as a way of getting cheap power, let alone as a mitigation, climate mitigation strategy. I guess in Chile, for those of you who do not know, similar to the Iberian Peninsula, Chile is a bit of an island because of the Andes. So it is traditionally a very expensive market to run, but with solar power, all of a sudden, it's becoming a much cheaper system to run. So we do find that the line was very, very cost effective. So in our model, we build a model and we basically look at the before, in the interim, and after when the whole transmission line is built. And what the model allows us is to basically look at two impacts of the grid. One is the immediate impacts of if you have more market integration, you get lower costs because you can do things more efficiently. This is not just about electricity, it's about trade, it's about anything, railroads. If you connect things better, costs go down. This is the production benefit. And then also the investment benefit. If you have this higher market integration, you are also putting the right playing field for investment to come in. And not surprisingly, we find that the investment effect is very important. So with our model, that's what we can do. We can do before and after, with and without investment, and see all the benefits of the line. So the paper is very long. I am here not explaining you the whole model, but the idea is that with this model, we can do this cost benefit. And what we do is try to be quite extensive in looking at what are the costs of the line, what are the benefits, what are the environmental benefits on top of the economic benefits, and we look at how consumers benefited from the line in this graph. So it's hard to see. The x-axis is the rate of return. Chile has a government rate of 5.83%, 6% rate of return. And we see that we do several assumptions, but for all of our different assumptions, the cost of the line, which is a very long-lived investment, is recovered in less than 20 years. And for very reasonable assumptions, the line is paid back in basically 5 to 10 years. So a very good investment. Now Chile is a bit of cheating a little bit because I told you transmission is very hard and Chile managed to do this big project. In part it's because in Chile it was a no-brainer. The political economy was such that the line was benefiting almost everyone except for the fossil fuel power plants, which is kind of it's okay. So it's the only kind of loser in the picture. Everyone else benefited from the line, so it was easy to find consensus. As I was mentioning, a lot of public policy innovation needs to be done in other places where placing these transmission lines is way harder. These direct current lines make it easier because you can put them underground, you can put them underwater. So all of a sudden, connecting, we were talking about the hydrogen project. I would connect Barcelona and Marseille with a direct current line. I think that would bring more directly power to, yes. So that's another option. New York State, for example, I don't know if you know New York State, but it's New York City, and then it borders with Canada, so it has a very funny shape. So it's thinking of putting a direct current line that can go underground from Canada to New York City. If it had to be above ground, it would be impossible from a not in my backyard perspective, from a right-of-way perspective. So again, Chile is a success story in there. So I wanted to finalize the talk with some more bigger picture takeaways. Let's see if I can find the slide here that I can see better, or otherwise I'm gonna shift here. So this is not something that I talked about, but I do think these success stories show that there is a lot of promise in renewable power. I didn't go into the details, but for example, for the case of Spain, there are also limitations to the integration of renewable power. So one big thing that will come in the next years is the role of batteries. And in batteries, I believe we will see something very similar. The cost of batteries are going down, they are going down very fast, and markets will also adapt to bring in the batteries in a more efficient way, in ways that maybe are hard to anticipate, but I think we will see a lot of innovation there. And this is what I kind of say as a big takeaway. We will see innovation, but not only in costs, we will see innovation in market design and also in how public policy is made to make sure that auctions for batteries or contracts for batteries end up working out basically from a more practical point of view. It's an area where we need to do a lot of work on how are we going to facilitate this different experience, that this know-how from different countries ends up basically arriving to other places. How can we make sure that markets are as efficient as possible, given what we are learning? I put here some more ideas, but there's so much to do, innovating with what we already have, at the same time that we are making what we have better. So I think that's it. Thank you so much for having me here. Yes.
Thank you, Mar. Now we are going to the floor. And some question, please. Yes, Dani Daviarderius. Perhaps I am not going to be recognized, be able to recognize all people who ask to put a question. In this case, I appreciate a lot if you can introduce by yourself.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation. I have a question about the Spanish case you have explained, because you mentioned that the balancing costs increase when we connect more renewables, more wind in the system. And my question is about, in the period you analyze, I don't know if it's exactly the same period, but in that period, the balancing markets integrated with some European balancing markets in order to increase the liquidity, decrease the prices, and also net balancing needs across countries. So I want to know if when you are saying the statement that the balancing cost increases, you are considering also this European market integration, and if you are considering the energy needs of balancing or also the cost needs of balancing. Thank you very much.
Yes, so we can talk about the specific change. I think it came in 2018. That's the change you have in mind. It's very much at the end of our sample, so we don't have it in our sample because we have until mid-2018. It would be easy to extend. But yeah, I guess our takeaway is that if one day you have more wind, balancing costs are higher. But we see that the increase is not very high. And we also see at different points in time that they go down. For example, when wind was allowed to provide frequency regulation, you can see significantly how costs go down. So this is kind of what the takeaway is, that yes, you have lemons, but you make lemonade and you make small changes, and all of a sudden, costs might still be higher, but you just have them. So yes, there is more wind, costs are higher, but they are lower than they used to be. Same with how wind is bidding in the market. It used to lead to quite a lot of distortions in the market, and you change how the market operates, and then you provide the right incentives. In some sense, we need to keep innovating because sometimes these things are hard to anticipate. I remember back in the day when windmills were all programmed to stop at the same time, at the same level. If it's really windy, it might be unsafe to use a windmill. So they were all kind of individually programmed to stop when it's unsafe. But then it would be that you would go from situations in you have maximal wind in the system, and all of your windmills stop at the same time because it's unsafe. So obviously that was a nightmare, and you are like, oh, of course it makes sense, but I guess you didn't plan for it, and now they are planning, okay, there is a lot of wind, how do we stop windmills in a way that's safe, but how we don't stop them at the same time, all of them. And this is small innovations that all of a sudden reduce the cost of having that much wind in the grid. For example, to give an example that I think is very vivid, because you can see maximal output and you stop everyone at the same time. That's not good when you have to manage supply and demand at the same time, all the time. So that's an example of small innovations that reduce the costs, but they do still increase with wind, but not as much as maybe one would have expected. Yep.
Thank you. Teresa García Milán. En la segunda fila.
My question is about my knowledge of this issue. So I've heard many times that you lose a lot of energy in the transportation of the electricity. So what's the limit of integrating the markets? Does it make sense to think about the European market altogether, going, as you were saying, from Barcelona to the North countries, or we lose too much energy, so we have to think about smaller areas?
Yeah, so this is an area that I didn't have time to explain too well, but there's been tremendous innovation. I would say a lot of it during the 2010s, but engineers can correct me. And these direct current lines, for example, they can go very, very long distances without losing a lot of power. Even a while back, Iceland was considering to connect Iceland with Ireland and Great Britain to bring power there. Some people are even joking that we will connect the whole world like we do with fiber, so that there's sun always at some point, because obviously the Earth is rotating. So I don't think we will get to connect the whole world like fiber, but it's become much less inefficient. It is quite efficient, and it can make a lot of sense, yes. Yeah, so it's been a big there have been many innovations and more to come, but yes.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Just, we have two questions. I propose to hear the two questions and you answer to both. Mike Watterson, before, please.
Okay. Thanks. So I was wondering, you say that the system has changed from a subsidy-based system to a capacity-based system. What happens with legacies, if you like? I mean, did Spain simply enforce this on existing plants, or did they allow the existing plants to keep their old system, but hope that new plants would gradually supplant them?
Juan Pablo Montero, please.
Mar, thank you for the presentation. It's a little bit about the political economy. I mean, you show very good numbers, that this was a very good investment. The question is, why didn't it happen before? So perhaps there is some story there about the hurdles, the barriers that some of these projects also have in a country like Chile, in which you say there are not many. But I think the reason why it didn't happen before may also shed some light on that.
Yes, so on that note, our understanding, and you can obviously correct me, traditionally the north, the mining region, didn't mind being separate from Santiago because it kind of safeguarded them against maybe more price fluctuations. They could have their contracts and be their own thing with the mining region. Many of these innovations, together with the fact that at some point, my understanding is that they had an interest to start shipping power down. So I think the interest of the mining region played a big role in maybe not happening earlier. That's my understanding. Solar costs also have gone down dramatically only in the last 5 years. So Chile made a big investment. It ended up being way better than they had anticipated. So it was already a good investment, but it ended up being way better than they had anticipated, yes. With today's solar prices, there's no way that they would have stopped this at all because it's a no-brainer, yes. And the other question, can you remind me? Oh yes, Spain does not have the best reputation when it comes to commitment. They had a big ordeal with solar subsidies that they ended up not paying in full. And for these wind farms, they just changed their economic terms on the spot. I'm very thankful that renewables now don't need any subsidy to be viable because it means that we can keep growing renewables in Spain without having to have a reputation that we will stick by them. But I think the reputation of Spain that they will stick by any subsidy that they announce is not very high, yes. Someone recently was presenting a hold-up paper in India, and they're like, Mar, what do you think about this? Is this more focused on developing countries? And I'm like, excuse me, hold-up? I know quite a bit about hold-up in Spain, yes.
Thank you, Mar. The last, because we have the coffee, we are taking time from the coffee. Just we are, no? Okay, we are taking time to the second.
Hello? Okay. Hi. Okay. So, Mar, I wanted to ask you about So my name is Sagantha, and I'm from Oxford. And I wanted to ask the question that in the past we've had so many laws that have facilitated acquiring land for coal or building pipelines and eminent domain, and some of that happened during the World Wars. So do we need to overhaul our legal system to make it easier? Because we did do that for the fossil fuel economy. And have you been seeing any reforms in laws?
So as I was mentioning, in the US now there is a big appetite to do that, and a lot of the argumentation is precisely to expose the inconsistencies between how you treat fossils and how you treat electricity, so there is a lot of movement there. In Europe, it is very hard. Even just doing a windmill is hard. But these direct current lines that can go underground or underwater, I think they'll make our life a bit easier. But yes, definitely. In Europe, it has already been done, in a sense, because it's treated much more as a natural monopoly and very socially, centrally planned. But in the US, there's a lot of work to do, yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mar. I'm sorry for the table one. That is your turn. And I'm very, very, very pleased.
Thank you. Yeah.